Good morning. Can you hear me loud and at the back? Can you hear me? Better. All right, so good morning and welcome to day 2. I hope you had a wonderful day yesterday and that you got some time to enjoy the afternoon and see a little bit of our wonderful city and its purple curtain at this moment. This morning I was driving to the university and I thought, oh, the jacaranda showed up really. We prayed for it and they are doing us proud. So this morning I've been asked to introduce our HOD. You've met me, you've met Henny, you've met Harry and Nadine and Adeline and Charmaine, all from the Department of Consumer and Food Sciences. And no, I'm not running the show over there. It's this wonderful man. So, I've been asked to introduce Prof Duodu, which is our next plenary speaker. But I cannot do that without reflecting on the Department of Consumer and Food Sciences, and that is for 2 main reasons. The first reason is that our department has a great story and a rich history. This Department of Consumer and Food Sciences originally started out as Food Sciences, and I think the original name was actually Dairying, which is funny because currently we want the dairy building for our new project. And the Department of Home Economics that changed over the years to Consumer Science, and that is 105 years ago, which makes us one of the first and oldest departments and programs at the University of Pretoria. All right, so at that time, as I've mentioned, it functioned as two different departments up until 2017 when we merged. Currently, the department houses 7 degree programs that is divided into 4 divisions. Food management, that I oversee, food science under the leadership of Prof de Kock, and nutrition under Dr. Adeline Pretorius, and then also clothing and textiles, which makes our department quite unique, under the head of Prof Sunay Donahue. But you need one person to keep track of all of us, and if you notice, it's 4 females, so it can get a little bit intense sometimes, and that is Prof Duodu. So before I continue telling you a little bit about him, the second reason why I have to emphasize our department is because even though the University of Pretoria is hosting you at Future Africa, it is our department, which I'm very, very honored and proud to be a part of, that is actually hosting you this year. And also, the reason why we have this picture up, this is where you will be having your conference dinner tonight. So yes, the program indicates that it's at the Javet. You'll be starting at the Javet Arts Center, but then after the tour there, you'll be escorted to this beautiful, I think it's the second most beautiful building. You'll see the first beautiful one. The second most beautiful building on campus, the old agricultural building, where we have been calling home for, since I've started there, of Gyebi, she's got a rich history because her roof burned down twice. And I think that was because the chemists were in there. But then since we've moved in, the old lady has been kept in, I think, a pristine condition. So getting back to our plenary speaker of this morning, Prof Duodu has a list of accolades as long as my arm, and I want to encourage you to go and read his bio in the program. It's quite impressive. In short, he's recognized as a C2 NRF-rated researcher with a strong focus on health-promoting properties of African grains and bioactives. Please do continue reading all of his research focus and the articles and in the program. The thing that I want to emphasize is that Prof Duodu is one of the kindest souls I've ever met, and it's truly an honor to be able to work with him. Some would call him our boss, but he works with us and alongside of us. And that is why it's also, we are able to host you. So with that said, I would like to introduce Prof Duodu and call him to the stage as our next plenary speaker this morning.
Good morning. Am I audible?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Nadine. I'm going to ask the Dean to give you a raise. Good. Right. It's a pleasure and an honor, obviously, for me to be with you this morning. And I get the sense that I think perhaps Nadine kind of had a peep and saw the first part of my presentation. So a lot of the stuff she was talking about with the department, I intended talking about, but I will go through it anyway. It will be like preaching to the choir. But, yeah, I believe in reinforcement as a teaching strategy. So bear with me. So I just wanted to share some thoughts with you about harnessing, as you can see, the innovation and collaboration for sustainable food systems in Africa. But before that, one thing I'd like to say is that I think you have a fantastic local organizing committee led by Nadine. And I say that for selfish reasons. Simply, they are all from my department. So that's why I say they are a fantastic team. And as you mentioned, we are housed in this building, as you've seen there, the old agricultural building. And I understand this building was actually inaugurated in 1921, way back, 1921. And the university actually had its origins starting off with the Faculty of Agriculture, which was housed in this building all those years ago. And so, yeah, we've come a long way, to put it simply. So, as she said, this evening's dinner will be in this building, and you get to see a bit more about it. And then also, as she said, we started off as two separate departments, Department of Consumer Science and the Department of Food Science. And then sometime in November of 2017, the university looked at us and decided to bring about an arranged marriage. So the two departments merged. I prefer to call it a marriage. I prefer to call it a marriage. And we merged together in November 2017 to form the Department of Consumer and Food Sciences. And I would like to, I don't know what my colleagues think, I'd like to believe that the marriage is going on really, really well. As you can see from this picture. I'd like to believe that marriage is going really, really well. And I think this picture shows that pretty well. So a little bit more, we offer undergraduate studies in these disciplines: consumer science, food science, culinary science, nutrition. We have various undergraduate degree programs. You will see in the red at the top, the Bachelor of Science programs. And then in the blue at the bottom, Bachelor of Consumer Science programs. And students can then go on and do postgraduate studies as well in our department. We are also, as perhaps you might have gathered, we are also quite research intensive as well. And I think currently one can look at our research landscape at a glance by looking at this little diagram here, where we're looking at a wide range of issues: value chain management, food chemistry and nutrition is very important for us, new product development, sensory science, clothing and textile science, and so on. And all these also interact and overlap with each other. And right embedded at the center of whatever we do is a consumer and the consumer's well-being. So to go into a bit more about it, various research fields ranging from food chemistry, food microbiology, sensory science, the consumer science is quite significant in our department as well. Foods, clothing and textiles, consumer behavior. We are mindful of the Sustainable Development Goals. I'll be talking a bit about that. SDG 1, no poverty, zero hunger, from SDG 2, good health and well-being, responsible consumption and production. And there's a very wide range of research topics that we're interested in. This is by no means an exhaustive list. So food and nutrition security is important for us. The food health interface is important for us. The chemistry of macro and micro components of food, product development. We have a strong sensory science division, food and textile waste, and sustainability is also quite important for us as well. And so that brings me, talking about sustainability, now brings me to the focus of this conference. And I found it quite interesting. Fed up, learning from the past, imagining new futures. And I may be wrong, but I thought there was no one who could have come up with that but Legume. Fed up, learning from the past, imagining new futures. I was excited to see the themes that have been set out running through the conference, looking at food production and sustainability. I'll be speaking a lot about that. Food nutrition and health as well. Food politics, policies, and cultures. And I think those are very important themes to look at. And I also looked at the questions being considered. How sustainable is the current food system? How do we improve public understanding of nutrition and community eating practices, and navigating the politics and policies of food systems? So I think these are very, very important questions to be considered, especially today. And sustainability has become a very, very important topic or theme that cuts through everything we do these days. And I'm going to start off by taking us through what we mean by sustainability. To a certain extent, I know I may be preaching to the choir here, but bear with me. We are talking about the ability to maintain something, in very simple terms, over time without causing harm or depleting resources. And I'll draw our attention to the Brundtland Commission, who perhaps pioneered the whole idea of sustainability. And they define that as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And what I like about this definition is in terms of the fact that it's quite powerful, because it brings out an intergenerational aspect of sustainability. It's not just about us, but about those who will come after us, which is very, very important. Now, we are supposed to be learning from the past. So I thought it would be useful to look at how modern sustainability rose. I mean, it's come a very long way. So some key events. In 1972, you may know about the Club of Rome. So this is like a think tank of various individuals. There were some economists in there, business leaders in there, scientists in there, and so on. And they produced a report, Limits to Growth report. And one of the main things they wanted to do is to highlight the fact that our planet has finite resources. Okay, the planet has finite resources. And so we cannot have exponential economic growth and population growth. We cannot have that going on indefinitely on a planet which has finite resources. Because yes, eventually the resources are going to run out. So that kind of started a conversation around sustainability. In the same year, United Nations had a conference on the human environment. That was the first major international gathering that began to now address global environmental concerns. And then moving on to, I spoke about the Brundtland Commission and their report on our common future. And they began to now popularize the idea or the definition of sustainability. We all know about the Earth Summit in Rio in 1992, leading to various agreements. Move on to 2000, where we had the Millennium Development Goals, which then evolved to the Sustainable Development Goals as we know them today. And when I look at that, they're looking at achieving sustainable development by 2030. We're in 2025. I wonder how we're doing. Something to think about. So they talk about sustainability based on three main pillars. There's an environmental issues, think about things about biodiversity, pollution, climate change, resource depletion. So on social issues, dealing with human rights, education, and so on, and economic issues as well. And these pillars intersect various sections where you can have a bearable situation, an equitable situation, or a viable situation. But what we want to do is to hit that sweet spot right in the center where all three intersect, where we are talking about sustainability. All right. And why does all this matter? Because we talk about the three pillars. We want to protect our planet for current and future generations. We want to ensure health, equity, and quality of life for all, and build resilient economies going into the future. And to a very large extent, I want to make this a bit Afrocentric. We're in Africa, by the way, make it a bit Afrocentric, because I believe that we have big challenges dealing with sustainability in the African continent. And I believe that looking at Africa in particular, we should always bear in mind the fact that the challenges dealing with sustainability in Africa are interconnected. I've put down two examples there. For instance, you cannot address environmental degradation without acknowledging that it also can have an impact on health. If you want to address food security concerns, you need to look at energy as well for irrigation. That's just a couple of examples. So the fact that these are interconnected should be top of mind for us as we begin to look at sustainability in Africa. Now, I also think that we should always remember the potential that Africa has. Okay, the potential Africa has. I've listed a few things here. Abundant resources, renewable energy, arable land, for instance. Africa is a very youthful continent. I don't know if you agree with me, but Africa is very youthful, all right, which speaks to capacity in terms of human resources that Africa potentially has. We have very rich traditional knowledge systems as well on the continent. All around the continent, there's a growing trend of innovation hubs, okay, and research capacity. We've been training lots of students, lots of researchers, so we're increasing research capacity on the continent. And I think this is important because we need to shift the narrative when we are talking about Africa, from a continent defined by its problems to a continent defined by its potential, innovation, and resilience. And I believe that's something that we should bear in mind. So what about the African food systems? If we want to address sustainability within the food systems, we should have an idea of what African food systems look like. And I have a few characteristics, key characteristics, as I'm calling them here, of African food systems. The first thing is that you will see that African food systems are dominated by smallholder entities, especially smallholder farmers. Some interesting things here. A large proportion of the African food production remains with small-scale smallholder farmers. And then these produce about 2/3 of the continent's food supply. A report by IFAD, International Fund for Agricultural Development, recently put some numbers there. About 30 million, an estimated 33 million smallholder farms on the continent. And the farmers these farmers produce about 70% of the food supply on the continent. So that's a very important characteristic that we need to have top of mind as we look at sustainability within African food systems. Secondly, relatively underdeveloped infrastructure and technology. A few examples here. Look at irrigation. We have lots of arable land, but only 7% irrigated, and I have some other regions there in comparison, 10%, South America 29%, East Asia 41%, South Asia, and so on. Mechanization, relatively lower use of productivity enhancing technologies. It's a characteristic. Far less use of fertilizer compared to the global average. Transport and connectivity is quite important. A very simple example, in a lot of African countries, sometimes the road networks between producing areas and areas where the foods are sold, the roads are not that good, road infrastructure is not that good, so it's quite a challenge just transporting food across. And then investment, finance and investment, also relatively lower compared to the global average. Something that is inescapable, vulnerability to climate change. It is inescapable. Okay, well, I mean, we all know the characteristics of climate change. We're seeing these in effect now. And I really love this particular slide. If you look at this map, this was produced in 2015, but it is showing us the change in agricultural productivity between 2003 and the 2080s, so a very, very long period of time. And this is a projection about how climate change is projected to affect agricultural productivity in various regions of the world. All right, so in simple terms, when you look at it, the areas shaded from yellow to orange to red are all regions that are expected to have lower or negative agricultural productivity due to climate change. And when you look at that, you would see that almost the whole of Africa is in either yellow, red, or orange. So that's a major challenge that we need to bear in mind, affecting food systems in Africa. Then, another characteristic of African food systems, changing food consumption, and in particular the nutrition, so-called nutrition transition. So there are various things that are contributing to this. The shifts in demography, population growth, quite importantly, urbanization as well. All of these are contributing to how food consumption is changing, and especially the nutrition transition, which It's quite important. The nutrition transition in particular is quite important. It's a real phenomenon in Africa. Now, when we talk about the nutrition transition, we are talking about a shift in diet as developed by Barry Popkin, a shift in diet commonly seen when low and middle income countries or regions move from a traditional nutrient-rich diet to what's a so-called Western diet. But now this characterized as being more processed, more refined, high in fat, sugar, salt, low in fiber, and so on. And that nutrition transition, all that we're trying to do here is to describe dietary changes and related health outcomes in different regions of the world. And one of the main drivers of this nutrition transition is urbanization. Rapid urbanization. Of course, globalization, urbanization, economic development, increased wealth, economic status, but urbanization in particular is a major driver of this nutrition transition. There was this report put out by the OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, on urbanization in Africa. And a few things came out of that report. Since 1990, the number of cities in Africa has doubled in number. Some numbers there, around about 3,300 to 7,600. Now, this report was in 2022, we're in 2025 now. So most likely it's gone up. The population also has increased. Cumulative population increased by around about 500 million people. So cities in Africa are rapidly growing, the most rapidly growing in the world, the youngest, and they are changing fast. So obviously this can have a profound effect. Okay, to give you a sense of the rise in urbanization, this gives urbanization rates in South Africa from 2011 to 2021, essentially a linear trend, increasing trend, as you see there. So these are drivers of the nutrition transition, and that leads me to what I call Africa's triple burden of malnutrition. People talk about double burden. I like to talk about triple burden. What do I mean by triple burden? We are familiar with undernutrition in Africa, micronutrient nutrition, that's one form of malnutrition, macronutrient malnutrition, another form of malnutrition, and then overnutrition as well is becoming a very, very important feature within African food systems. So various drivers there. I mentioned urbanization, rising incomes leading to poor dietary choices, and so on, bringing about the nutrition transition and then overnutrition. And then there we have increase in non-communicable diseases, which is a big problem, big issue now in Africa. I came across this research done by a couple of researchers at Nelson Mandela University. They did a survey of 2,000 learners from 12 marginalized primary schools. Now, this is what they found. Now, this is amongst kids of school-going age. 43% of the learners that they surveyed showed a risk factor of getting one or more non-communicable diseases. These are kids of school-going age. The highest risk for non-communicable disease was for children who were overweight or obese. 19% of the group was overweight or obese, mostly girls. So it's a real problem. To give you a sense, this is data from the World Health Organization. Number of deaths attributed to what they're calling the malignant neoplasms. In simple terms, some form of cancer in South Africa from 2000 to 2019. And what you're seeing there is essentially an increasing trend. An increasing trend. You see a similar picture with diabetes as well, an increasing trend. So the issue of non-communicable diseases, nutrition transition is a very, very big issue in Africa. So that means that we have important food and nutrition security and health challenges on the continent, deriving from the food systems. I've spoken about climate change impacts, land degradation is also important, post-harvest losses and food waste, malnutrition, and I've just spoken about the scourge of non-communicable diseases. And you can see that in the level of food insecurity that we have on the continent. If you look at what we've got there, we've got here the prevalence of food insecurity in Africa compared to the rest of the world. So we have the world average there, and then you can see Africa there with the prevalence of food security much, much higher. Now, within the African continent, if you look at the different regions, there are serious challenges, particularly in Central Africa, Eastern Africa, and Western Africa, where the prevalence of food security is quite high. So with all these challenges, and looking at our food systems, we need to look at the question is, what can we do to meet these challenges? And one of the ways that we can look at this is by looking at the crops that are important from an African context. So if you look at the challenge that we have, the crops that we are going to be using or rely on for food must have some features, which I'm proposing here. Drought tolerant, talking about climate change, low water footprint, it should be nutritious, and health promoting as well. And I believe that Africa does have crops that fit the bill to allow us to try and meet these challenges. We have lots of climate smart African cereal and legume grains, and that's a big area of research in our department. In our department, a lot of the grains that we use for food, we do the research in that we use for food, what we normally would, climate smart, normally referred to as generally underutilized compared to other major crops. So for instance, we do lots of work on sorghum and millets, and then various types of legumes as well. So these crops give us an opportunity as we try to meet these challenges that are faced by African food systems, especially when it comes to food, nutrition, security, and health. So I'm going to just take you briefly through some of the research that we do in this area, looking at the types of research we do with these grains to try and address some of these challenges. And one area of research we've been looking at is what we call fruit-to-food fortification. So in simple terms, this was a definition proposed by some colleagues of ours in this article. Addition of micronutrient-dense foods to a recipe. It can be at household level or food industry level, or the replacement of micronutrient-poor anti-nutrient-rich ingredients to substantially increase the amount of bioavailable micronutrients with the aim of improving the micronutrient status of populations where this is low or inadequate. Trust the researchers to come up with a very long definition, but you get the idea. Okay, so in simple terms, what we're trying to do here is that there is conventional fortification, which is good. And I need to mention, this is not being proposed as an alternative. It's being proposed as a complement to conventional fortification. So one of the ways we're looking at this is, okay, so now instead of doing a conventional fortification, there's an opportunity to use plant foodstuffs as fortificants. In simple terms, that's what we're trying to do here. So you would have a cereal base. It can be from cereal, sorghum, finger millet, maize, and so on and so forth. And then we can use various things as food fortificants. In our research, we've used the mighty baobab. You might have heard about baobab. Right, yeah, very important tree in Africa, the mighty baobab. I don't think anyone here hasn't heard about moringa. Okay, orange flex sweet potato, and so on. So instead of doing conventional fortification, we've done a lot of research where we've used these plant fortificants and looked at the effect on various things like mineral bioavailability and mineral bioaccessibility and so on. So for instance, a group of our colleagues where we were involved in a USAID project a few years ago. Thank God we did that before. You know what? Okay. We were involved in a project on sustainable reduction of post-harvest losses and under the Feed the Future program. And we were collaborating with Purdue University in the US with partners in University of Eldoret in Kenya, IITA in Senegal with us. So we did some food-to-food fortification studies, and I'm just going to share with you briefly some results that we got. We looked at 3 cereal bases. We looked at finger millet, we looked at maize, and then we looked at sorghum as well. Pearl millet, not finger millet. Okay, so this is work done by some colleagues of ours where they are looking at fortifying with baobab fruit powder, moringa leaf powder, and then organic acids, and looking at the effects on iron bioaccessibility in this particular piece of work. So what you see here is what the effect was on percentage bioaccessible iron. And so I have these 2 arrows pointing to percentage bioaccessible iron in the porridge that was fortified with baobab compared to the porridge that was fortified with moringa, and then compared to the control, which was just the millet porridge. And then you will see that the one fortified with baobab had higher percentage bioaccessible iron, comparable to, if you look at the end there, one where we added citric acid was added, very high percentage bioaccessible iron, and I'll come back to that. And then a similar trend when you look at the effect on the actual amount of bioaccessible iron. So there must be something happening with the moringa to bring down the percentage bioaccessible iron. I'll come back to that. And then in the maize porridge system, similar story. The one with baobab, very high percentage bioaccessible iron and high amount of bioaccessible iron as well with the one with baobab. Right. And then this one was in a sorghum system where John was one of my PhD students who did some work looking at the sorghum system and how the food fortification could influence iron bioaccessibility. Similar story here. Sorghum with baobab, very high percentage bioaccessible iron, much lower as soon as you bring moringa into the mix. And the amount of bioaccessible iron, similar story. One of the interesting things about John's work was the fact that he looked at a conventionally cooked porridge and an instant porridge prepared using extrusion cooking. And you find the same story there. John went on to look at iron uptake in cells, KP2 cells, looking at how it affects ferritin formation. And you can see the extruded sorghum flour baobab much higher ferritin formation in Keiko-2 cells compared to the one in moringa. So we're seeing here the fortified porridge with baobab seems to perform very, very well compared to the one with moringa. And the reason is quite simple, due to the role of organic acids. Okay, the role of organic acids. So if you look at the fortificants that we used, right, and focus particularly on citric acid, you see the baobab had very, very high levels of citric acid. And these organic acids play an important role as what we call mineral bioaccessibility enhancers. They enhance bioaccessibility of minerals. The principle is quite simple. They form soluble chelates with the minerals. So they keep the minerals in a soluble form to make them bioaccessible. So what was the story with the moringa? Due to the presence of anti-nutritional factors, so relatively higher levels of anti-nutritional factors in the moringa compared to the baobab, hence the relatively lower performance of the porridges that were fortified with moringa compared to baobab. So we are dealing with anti-nutritional factors, but we also believe that these anti-nutritional factors also can play a role. Okay, so these mineral bioavailability inhibitors, the phenolics and the phytates, can also be viewed as phytochemicals. And we do a lot of research where we are looking at the health promoting properties of these phytochemicals. And we are dealing with a simple hypothesis where we believe that these dietary phytochemicals can modulate various physiological processes and bring about protection against non-communicable diseases. That's a simple theory. We've been doing a lot of work in that area, ranging from characterizing these compounds, these phytochemicals, looking at various antioxidant assays. We do a lot of work with cell lines as well, and we are looking forward in the future, moving on to animal studies and human intervention studies. And one of the things that we look at as an indicator of health promoting properties is whether the food that we have and its components have the ability to protect against oxidative stress. And the way we measure that is by looking at the ability of these components to scavenge what we call reactive oxygen species in cell lines. So this is an assay that we do cellular antioxidant activity, just to show you some results that we've had. This is from John's work, where we're looking at protection against oxidative stress. So you have conventionally cooked sorghum there, and then various types of instant sorghum porridges fortified with these plant foodstuffs, and they exert very high protection by scavenging these cells. Another thing we look at is the ability to scavenge nitric oxide. Okay, we look at it as a measure of anti-inflammatory effects. Okay, and when inflammation happens, we have lots of nitric oxide produced. The nitric oxide does play a role, an important role, has an important role to play. But then when it occurs in very high levels, it can also lead to damage of cells. So we look at the ability to scavenge these nitric oxide molecules as one of the ways by which we can look at anti-inflammatory effects. And this simply shows you some of the work we've done, determination of anti-inflammatory properties. You can look, if you see the control and the percentage of nitric oxide produced very high compared to the control, and then we look at the control, then look at the different porridges, and the various substances are able to reduce the percentage of nitric oxide produced. So this was done in a chemical assay. And we're also able to show this in a cell line system as well, where we look at production of nitric oxide in these cells and the ability of these foods to reduce the production of nitric oxide as a measure of anti-inflammatory effects, and so a measure of health promoting properties as well. So these are some ways by which we try and measure these health promoting properties, ways by which we try and look at the ability of these important crops to help us as we look at meeting the challenges posed in African food systems. Now, when you look at what I've just shared with you, and let's look at the agricultural value chain. So moving from inputs, production, local usage, sale, all through to transport, processing, packaging, inspection, commercial sale, consumers. So you have a very wide value chain. What I've just shared with you is what we are able to do from our own small vantage point within the value chain. That value chain has various stakeholders and actors. And when I look at this value chain, where I find myself in terms of the work that I do is what I've circled in red, processing. So I've given you something that we're trying to do from our own small little vantage point within the whole value chain. And what I'm trying to say here is that meeting these challenges needs concerted effort from all the actors and stakeholders within the whole value chain working together. So it calls for different ways of doing research. These days, one of the buzzwords at the University of Pretoria is transdisciplinary research. Okay, they're encouraging us to do transdisciplinary research as a way of addressing the challenges that we face. Now, I'm a musician, and so I like to think of things in terms of music. Okay, please don't ask me to sing. And the way I see this is that all these actors and stakeholders need to come together and work together, just like a symphony orchestra, in order to meet these challenges. That's the way I see it. There is a need for a holistic approach to tackling these challenges that confront African food systems. It calls for the involvement of all the actors and stakeholders in the value chain to work together, like a symphony orchestra, in collaborative initiatives to create strategic synergies. I believe very strongly in that. So where is all of this taking us? Some points to put in your pocket. Our challenges are complex. Okay, our challenges are complex. And I think that buttresses the fact or highlights the importance of involving various stakeholders in meeting these challenges. And so they demand integrated solutions. So we need to pursue actively cross-disciplinary partnerships. You cannot say I need to stay in my own small island and solve the problems of the world. And so we need to leverage diverse perspectives and expertise. We need to note the importance of local context and indigenous knowledge. Africa is rich in that. Co-create solutions with communities as well. Okay, look at solutions elsewhere, but then don't just do copy and paste. Okay, so avoid important solutions that do not fit, and then empower local stakeholders, and beneficiaries. So it's a call to action to innovate for impact, build capacity, influence policy, and inspire change. Okay, building capacity is very high, is very dear to my heart, because we're involved in training students. So mentoring the next generation of African researchers becomes quite important for us as well. So with that, I would just like to say that I hope that this conference will be a catalyst for new collaborations, groundbreaking ideas, and renewed commitment as we move forward in trying to meet the challenges that are faced by African food systems, and as we strive to attain and realize sustainability in African food systems. And with that, I'll thank you for your attention.
So I'm sure that was very thought-provoking and inspiring session with Prof Duodu. I hope you enjoyed that. We're going to open the floor now for some questions.
Any questions? Good morning. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. It was very insightful. Yesterday we have seen from one of the presentations where one was studying the interests of Gen Alpha, and basically the main takeaway that I took was the interest of fast food and getting insights from internet and screens. Speaking about sustainability also involves a lot of culture and traditions. Considering the world that is more capitalist than ever, and companies are focusing more on this generations that are more interested in buying things. First, they are less interested in cooking their own meals, and are more interested in fast foods. How do we position ourselves as researchers in order to, the world is not compete, but we need to do something to also bring attention to cultural appropriate foods, foods that have tradition, and also going back to healthy diets. Thank you.
Very good question. You raised some very important points there. And I think it gives us some opportunities. I'm looking at the youth today. I spoke about urbanization, how it's affecting people. People are looking for convenience. And so someone goes to work, comes home, cannot, but doesn't feel like cooking from scratch. Okay, so you pass by KFC, right? And, no one looks for KFC. How about KFC? Some people looking for convenience and so on. I think we have an excellent opportunity in terms of looking at the students we're training now, for them to take the message forward. A few years ago, we had international, what they call international sorghum conference, still held in Cape Town. Okay, and one of the buzzwords or buzz phrases that was running during that conference is "make sorghum great again." Don't ask me what that is. Make sorghum great again. And there were talks, there were discussions about initiatives of meeting the youth where they are. We have lots of social media, for instance. Okay, social media. These days, I'm seeing trends, and I'm heartened to see that. Trends where some of our own students have Instagram pages and so on, where they are looking at various types of foods from these grains, these underutilized grains, various types of foods that have been developed and so on, and marketing these on social media, Instagram, and so on and so forth. I believe all those are channels that give us an opportunity which we can use to reach out to the youth. It's about education, letting them know, making them aware. And I think we can tap into the that we have in terms of the students that we are training to take the message forward. So that's an opportunity.
5 more minutes and we're heading to tea. Somebody.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I'm just interested really to know what informs the choices on the food-to-food fortification. I see you listed the baobab, moringa, and the sweet potatoes against those things.
Yeah. So when we're doing this work, we actually screened a wide range of different foodstuffs. Okay, it wasn't just these. Even things like amaranth leaves, hibiscus leaves, what else? Various types of fruits as well. We screened a very, very wide range. We just settled on these, the baobabs, as you see there, because of its high organic acid content. Okay. Moringa we used because it tended to have very high levels of minerals, like iron, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, the orange fresh sweet potato, definitely because of beta carotene, and so on. So we're not saying these are the only foodstuffs that can be used. A wide range of foodstuffs can be used. But for the purposes of this particular research, we chose these based on, like I said, organic acid content, mineral content, and so on. So that's informed our use of these particular foodstuffs.
All right, one more last section. Thank you so much for the presentation. Good morning, colleagues. Mine is just, an emphasis on what I thought was also resonating with what other scholars are currently exploring. I like the fact that your presentation recognized that Africa has a huge bulge in terms of its demographics, particularly on the youth. So it means that any intervention, should be youth orientated because they are the future. And I wish that could be a national anthem, yes, because in Africa we have a crisis of 8 leaders who don't want to think, okay, what they think they are thinking for the youth, and they are not, putting the youth as some of the solution makers. And I like that, and I wish in this room when we move out, we could advocate for the inclusion of the youth, because it is no doubt that they are the future. What I also like is the recognition of the innovation, and which I think some of our solutions should be orientated around this. I was even thinking that maybe in your presentation you would explore, the newly rising AI and yes, because it would aid us, in finding groundbreaking solutions. But what I also like mostly is that you recognizing the wealth of communities. Yes, oftentimes we look at them as research sites, not as co-creators of knowledge, and hence why, because they have not been recognized as co-producers of knowledge. Hence why when you apply for the paper series, they at this current moment, because they've been profiled, they would even resist the research because it's like you recognizing them as your experiments, not as part of co-creators. And your emphasis on interdisciplinary research and recognizing the properties of the food. As someone who also supervises on medical anthropology, where we explore issues of sexual and reproductive health, and teenage pregnancy in Africa, we're actually looking at the food that our youth, is eating, which prepares their bodies, for pregnancies and so forth. So your presentation is indeed, in my view, what Africa needs, and the recognition of the moringa. My mom survived the stroke because she was benefiting from the moringa tea, the moringa porridge. And in South Africa, we've got an old man these days trending on social media. I may not be able to translate this, but he calls it Legume. Yes, it's a powder. It's something that is so powdery, and he explains, properties that, and those that have actually consumed it, they say it immediately you eat it, you feel energized, body pains, that. And one realizes that in Africa, we do not, yes, of course, we may have weeds, but we do not have, not every plant is a weed, that also calls that we need to preserve the extension of these plants that could, help us from dying. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think you wrapped up this session perfectly, making my life much easier. So I'm going to invite you if you have any other questions, because it's to probably during our tea time. I'm sure we're having some nice South African snacks again with that. And then afterwards, the group splits in two. Please consult your program. We will be, some of the sessions will be here, and then also in conference room 2, which is the afternoon, the one with the garden. Right, so have a nice day.